All right, as we continue to roll with the show, everybody out there, we're getting ready for SWAC Media Day coming up this week. So we're breaking down the different SWAC programs. We've already done Mississippi Valley, Bethune-Cookman, UAPB, Grambling State, and Prairie View. Now it leads us into Texas Southern Blue, a program in 2024 that went 5-6 overall and 4-4 in conference play. Their notable win, of course, breaking a long losing streak to Prairie View to start the season in the Labor Day Classic. 27-9 victory over the Panthers. Worst loss on the season right there in Houston against another opponent in Rice, 69-7. Looking at Texas Southern, the Tigers offensively, they were 8th in scoring and averaging 21 points a game. They were 12th in total offense at the bottom, averaging 265 yards a game. 6th in rush offense, averaging 147 rushing yards a game. And at the bottom, and 12th in pass offense, averaging 117 passing yards a game. Defensively, Blue, they were 8th in scoring defense, giving up an average of 29 points a game. They were 6th in total defense, giving up an average of 353 yards a game. 9th in rush defense, giving up an average of 175 rushing yards a game. And Blue, as we round out the defensive stats, the Tigers were 5th in pass defense, giving up an average of 178 yards a game. Looking back at Texas Southern last year for you.
Yeah, I think this was one of the best, most underappreciated coaching jobs of the SWAC in the SWAC last year, Perry. Chris Dishman came in, and people were saying 0 games, 1 game. I think 2 or 3 games was probably the ceiling for a lot of people. They win 5 games. They almost knock off Lamar in a huge out-of-conference game. Lamar made a push for the playoffs. It was pretty competitive in the Southland. And all this after they lose their starting quarterback, Perry, early in the season. So I think Dishman hasn't got the credit he deserves because Texas Southern is very quiet. He's not all out in the media, very quiet about his additions. They have a lot of returning talent, Perry. KJ Cooper comes back. He's healthy. They got some interesting weapons out at wide receiver form. Linebacker should be I think their linebacker room might be one of the better ones in the conference. I think Texas Southern's a very, very interesting team. The question is going to be, can they stay healthy, Perry, because the injuries ravaged them at times last year. So I think Texas Southern is going to be a very, very interesting team to watch if they can stay healthy.
Moving on from Texas Southern, let's look at a program made a coaching change. Of course, Connell Maynard is no longer there. Looking at Alabama A&M in 2024, the Bulldogs went 6-6. They were 4-4 overall in conference play. Notable win last year, 22-17 victory over Grambling State. Their worst loss, of course, 73-3 versus Auburn. Offensively, when you look at the Bulldogs, they were 2nd in scoring, averaging 30 points a game. They were first in total offense, averaging 444 yards a game. 3rd in rush offense, averaging 184 rushing yards a game. And they were number 1 in the conference in pass offense, averaging 260 yards a game. Defensively, though, not so good. 9th in scoring defense, giving up 30 points a game. They were 8th in total defense, giving up an average of 367 yards a game, Blue. 6th in rush defense, giving up an average of 148 rushing yards a game. And near the bottom at 11th in pass defense, giving up an average of 219 yards a game. And look back at Alabama A&M last year and looking ahead to this year.
Yeah, I think this is, out of most of the first-year head coaches, this is probably one of the best situations for someone to step into because, Perry, I think me and you could make an argument that Alabama A&M's had some of the better individual talent in the SWAC the past few seasons.
Mm-hmm.
The problem has been they've been really good offensively at times, and their defense just has not found any rhythm. And I think you bring in a guy like Sam Shade, who you know is going to rebuild the defense. They added some really, really interesting transfers, especially up from the Division II level. I do think their defense gets better. The question, though, Perry, is now you lose your offensive mind. Does the offense take a step back? That's the big question, right? Do you improve defensively, take a step back offensively, and you're kind of still in the same place? They have some really, really good weapons at running back. But the biggest question for this team is who wins the quarterback battle. Is it going to be Mekhi Hagans, who we saw had a really good year at Arkansas Pine Bluff, or does Quad Brown, who I've been hearing so much about since he transferred from UT Martin, is this finally the time he shows us on the field, Perry, what all this offseason hype is about? Because he's gotten offseason hype for the past 2 years. Hagans versus Brown is probably going to determine the trajectory of Alabama A&M season, year 1 of Sam Shade. But I still think they're probably a year away from really competing in the SWAC East just because of how competitive that division is.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that quarterback battle. And defensively, this is a program that we have seen, especially during those Connell Maynard years, offensively, good luck trying to keep up with them. That's why you see them ranked in the higher end of every statistic offensively, but defensively, this team has continued to struggle to find talent and find a defensive scheme that works for them to stop offenses around the conference.
That's the question, right? Because I mean, the weird thing here is they've had some really good individual defensive talent. It's just as a unit, they haven't played well, and maybe it was coaching, right? Because I always look at the coaching first. I think they upgraded in terms of the defensive staff, and obviously now you have a defensive-minded head coach. That in Perry, I think me and you both do this. If your head coach is a defensive guy, the defense can't be bad. If he's an offensive guy, the offense can't be bad. So it's really going to determine Sam Shade's tenure is, one, making sure the defense takes a big step forward, and then two, making sure you pick the right quarterback. Because, Perry, could we go down the list of head coaches in the SWAC who have been fired because they made the wrong decision on multiple quarterback battles?
Man, it is Eric Dooley to be one. I mean, I hate to keep bringing that name up, but we've seen that in the past, haven't we?
Yeah, he probably cost himself. He potentially cost himself his job by 2 straight years picking the wrong guy.
Yeah. As we move forward now, let's look at Alcorn State. The Braves last year going 6-6 overall. They were 5-3 in conference play. Notable win for me for the Braves, 42-21 victory over Texas Southern. Their worst loss on the season, 55-0 against Vanderbilt. Looking offensively for the Braves, they ranked 7th in scoring offense, averaging 21 points a game. They were 5th in total offense, averaging 346 yards a game. 2nd in rushing offense, 197 rushing yards a game on average, but on the passing side, they struggled. 10th in passing offense, Blue, averaged only 149 passing yards a game. Let's look at the Braves defensively. 7th in scoring, averaging, giving up 28 points a game. They were 4th in total defense, giving up an average of 347 yards a game. 8th in rush defense, the Braves giving up 175 average rushing yards a game, and they were at the bottom in pass defense, Blue. 12th in pass defense, giving up 104 yards a game. Man, looking at Alcorn State, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's going to come down to, one, can they find a quarterback? And then two, everything talked about in that signing day press conference about getting bigger at the line of scrimmage, getting taller at corner, getting more athletic at safety. Like, did they check all those boxes? Because I think they have a lot of talent at running back, because you mentioned they were 2nd in the conference in rushing. Jaguar and Sewell comes back. All their quarterbacks are athletic enough to make something happen with their legs. Offensive line, they return multiple starters. And then I even think defensively, an underrated addition that just recently happened. It's on their updated roster now, too. I've heard, it's been about 2 weeks since I've heard this was going to happen. Demarion Edwards is actually back. All SWAC linebacker. He initially transferred to Norfolk State. Alcorn flips him back to Lorman. That's a huge addition for them, is that they have multiple starters now back at linebacker. I think the secondary, though, man, they were really, really active in the transfer portal, really active at the junior college level. They had to revamp that entire secondary because, like you said, I don't think Cedric really was impressed with the defense at all, man. He's a defensive-minded guy, didn't live up to his standard. Quarterback battle, and did they improve in the trenches, and can they improve the secondary, are the biggest question marks. And I think Cedric knows, I don't think he's on the hot seat this year, Perry, but if Alcorn has another bad year or another subpar year, the pressure and the noise in Lorman going into year 3 is going to be deafening. This is really kind of like a prove-it year for Cedric Thomas on the reservation.
And I made a mistake with Alcorn. They were 4th in pass defense last year in the conference, giving up an average of 172 yards, not 12. They were 4th in the conference. But as we look past Alcorn, because, I mean, they were right there knocking on the door. A loss on the road at Southern really put them in a tough spot. Southern ended up going all the way. Now we look at Alabama State, right? The Hornets finished 7-5 last year, 5-3 in conference play. Notable win, 21-17 victory over the team we just talked about, Alcorn State. Their worst loss was 28-13 against FAMU. Looking at Bama State last year, they were 6th in scoring, averaging 22 points a game. They were 8th in total offense, averaging 312 yards a game. They were 4th in rush offense, Blue, averaging 169 yards a game. And they were 11th in pass offense, averaging 143 passing yards a game. Defensively, they were the toast of the conference, first in almost every stat. First in scoring defense, giving up an average of 16 points a game. The Hornets were first in total defense, giving up 365 yards a game. They were first in rush defense, only giving up an average of 106 yards a game. And they were second in pass defense, giving up an average of 159 yards a game. I think looking at Bama State, they can hold their hat on defense. It has been offense that has hurt them over the years that I think has kept them out of an opportunity at going to a SWAC championship. But for you, Blue, looking at Alabama State last year and looking ahead to this year.
Yeah, this is going to be another super intriguing team because you mentioned kind of what they held their hat on, right? It was defense, and they were so good defensively. Now they have to replace almost the entire staff. You know, their defensive coordinator. They got to replace multiple starters. I think they only returned one true starter on the defense. They got about 8 guys coming back there that played 150 or more snaps last year. You know, at safety, they do have a guy who was supposed to start. I believe he got hurt against North Carolina Central, and Drake Johnson, who was a transfer from Southern Illinois, Texas State, and he was going to be the starter, but got hurt, had a medical redshirt year. But you mentioned their struggles offensively, Perry, but this is the interesting part is offensively, they returned 14 significant contributors offensively. And that includes Jamari Holtzclaw, who had an explosive freshman season, ended up getting hurt. They returned 4 offensive linemen that played over 430 snaps last year. Wide receiver, they got some talent coming back, Jalen Jones, Harrell at wide receiver. The question is going to be, and Perry, stop me where you've heard this one before, can Andrew Body stay healthy?
Mm-hmm.
That's the question, because I think we saw – I know people, you know, question his passing, but he really wasn't giving a chance to really pass it against Central because of that weird scheme they were running. Let's not forget, before Body got hurt, he had them on the verge about to upset Central, who was one of the first 4 teams out for the FCS playoffs last year. So it's not like Andrew Body went out there and couldn't lead them against a really, really good team. And I'm going to be very, very curious to see if Andrew Body can help turn this offense around because, Perry, if they don't get it right with this many players coming back and this many significant contributors, I think you have to kind of look at Eddie Robinson Jr. kind of in the same vein as you maybe look at the Damon Wilson up at Morgan State, and he can build a great defense, but offensively there's just something missing. And at the end of the day, that's going to cost you in key games that are going to separate you from being a true contender and a championship contender. And I think this is a make-or-break year offensively for Alabama State. They have to find a way to at least be serviceable offensively.
Let's talk about real quick before we go to break, Andrew Body. Your thoughts? He transferred in from Texas Southern, of course, getting hurt like you just talked about in that first game against North Carolina Central. They basically he was seemed like in that game like a Taysom Hill for the Saints. They just basically had him all over the place. But your thoughts with Andrew Body and the potential, because this is a kid that we've seen has all of the potential, but we've yet to be able to see a true full season under him at Alabama State.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, we only played in one game last year because he got hurt. But, I mean, even in his limited passing in that game, he was still like 4 for 6. Like, he was efficient, you know, when he was playing. The problem is, like I said earlier, they didn't give him any chances. They used him more as a runner, and it was kind of weird. Maybe his shoulder wasn't fully healthy, and they didn't want to throw it much. But this is a guy who, I mean, we forget this guy was an all SWAC selection at Texas Southern. Like he has the single season record at Texas Southern for total offense in a season. He's 4th all time in passing, and he did all this as a sophomore, Perry. And so I think if he stays healthy, he has the potential to be a top 3 quarterback in this conference. Like I don't anybody who just looks at his game and says he's trash, Perry, I don't respect their football opinion because they don't really know what they're watching. But at the end of the day, and I've heard this over and over, and I've seen it in your chat, the best availability or the best ability is availability. And that's been his problem. He's been hurt. And I do wonder if maybe sitting out all last season, getting another surgery, rehabbing, and taking a full almost 2 years to get ready has primed him for one last season of excellent play. And I think that's what Bama State's going to need if they're going to push for a SWAC championship appearance. They need Andrew Body to be what he was those 2 good years at Texas Southern.
And you're talking about one more thing about Bama State before we let them go. defensively, what has made this defense the toast of the conference the past couple years? I mean, they are tough, and this is really defense wins championships. We know the offense has kept BAMA State out of it, but defensively, man, they're the top.
Man, you are not lying. Okay, obviously it's hard to kind of point to one thing, Perry, but there's three components that I've noticed from BAMA State that I really love. One, Perry, I don't know if they're growing them in a lab somewhere. I don't know where they're finding them, but every single year they have a 6'2", 6'3" corner, and they have like four of them. Perry, I don't know if they're hiding them. I don't know what they're offering, but they always seem to have elite size in terms of corners on the outside, and that gives you such an advantage. And they're always so physical. The other thing is, Perry, their defense allows their linebackers to play so free. You look at Bubba Adams, you look at their mics last year. They are sideline to sideline, and they allow their linebackers to be super aggressive, which creates a whole lot of negative plays. There's a reason Bubba was putting up, 13, 14, 15 tackles for loss.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because they allow those linebackers to be so aggressive, which leads me to my last point. Their edge rushers are always so good. They're so good while they're good at rushing the passer, Perry, they're so good against the run and not losing their contain while rushing the passer and allowing big plays off of their aggressiveness. Because to play so aggressive, you have to be disciplined. And I think that all ties into why Bama State's been so good defensively over these past few years. And I'm going to be very curious to see if that can continue under a new defensive coordinator next year.